Well, hi there. You're watching Times Network with me, Meghna Deka. Well, are you looking for the best education opportunities, a global academic collaboration, or simply to upskill to keep up with the times? Well, the avenues for your contribution and collaboration with world leaders of education are many. But what is going to be the most promising, the most viable over the next 20 years is the big question. Well, we're here to help. Well, the Australian Education Indian Potential Partnership for Global Success will be defining for you the value delivered by the Australian education in shaping global careers and how Australian and Indian institutions have aligned to internationalize education. In our very first episode of the two-episode series, we have an esteemed panel today joining us. Ms. Sarah Story, she is the Australian Deputy High Commissioner to India. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being here. Professor V. Ram Gopal Rao, the former director of IIT Delhi, is here on the show as well. Professor Michael Wesley, the DVC International of the University of Melbourne in Australia, is here on the show. Also, there is Mr. Matthew Johnson, the Minister Counsellor of the Department of Education, Skills and Employment. Well, Ms. Story, I'm going to begin with you. So how would you like to define the education relationship so far that we have between India and Australia? Do you see it as the next big stage in this relationship as our nations are coming even closer strategically as well?
Absolutely. The Australia-India education relationship is a long one. Indian students have been coming to Australia since the 1990s. And as well as providing a great educational experience and, of course, qualifications that are utilised all over the world, we have great partnerships. These are institutional to institutional partnerships right here with Indian research and university institutions here, as well as on the government to government side. We've had a ministerial-led body that shares experiences existing for many years. So in addition to that, the relationship, as you say, has never been closer. Our prime ministers are extremely close and our ministers are engaging on every level. Just recently, I saw our Trade, Tourism and Investment Minister, Tian, meet with a group of outbound Indian students about to embark on their educational experience in Australia. They were studying from bachelor's to PhD, everything from pharmacology to finance. And it was just wonderful to see such enthusiasm. But more broadly, with India's national education policy, India is determined to drive international engagement, and Australia is very keen to be there with you because we know that by bringing greater collaboration and excellence together, we are creating global citizens, and that is going to drive innovation and growth throughout our two countries. Thanks.
Well, this is very interesting what you say. In fact, Professor Wesley, if I just take that forward from what Ms. Story was saying, Indian students, after all, made up roughly 21% of your international student entries in the year 2020. And we now hear that as Australia's borders are opening up, this proportion is likely to even grow further. So what has been the impact of the India-Australia education relationship on Australia's diversity and development?
Oh, look, it's had a wonderful effect. I come to you today from the city of Melbourne, which has, I believe, the largest concentration of any city in Australia of Indian students and, in fact, of people of Indian background. And the Indian students who come to study with us and to work here in Melbourne provide wonderful diversity and richness to our community. We have really missed them while they haven't been able to come and join us. And in fact, just this week is our orientation week here at the University of Melbourne. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to see so many young people, many of them international students, many of them from India, back on our campus and enjoying being here and enjoying getting to know each other.
How does the Australian system of education really look at autonomy? For that, let me go across to Mr. Johnson.
Yes, thanks very much, Meghna. So Australia's quality assurance and education accreditation systems prioritises autonomy, academic freedom and academic integrity. We have two national independent regulators for both the higher education and vocational education systems, and both of these regulators have a very strong role in ensuring our education is high quality and world class, as Ms. Story talked about in her earlier answer. Probably very similar to some of the roles that the UGC plays here in India. So our regulators take, a similar but slightly different approach. They look at risk, and they take a risk-based approach and focus on driving quality outcomes in our institutions and encouraging our institutions to self-assess and accredit. So they look at a number of different domains around student participation and attainment, so looking at the employability outcomes for our students, the learning environments, what's the quality of teaching, and we have surveys, including student surveys, which look at this, the quality of our research and research training, and what the institutions themselves are doing in terms of their quality assurance, their own academic integrity processes, and all of these types of governance arrangements. So our system values and prioritises autonomy. It promotes institutional autonomy to ensure quality. And it's not about the government telling institutions what to do. No, not at all. It encourages compliance with our standards and drives institutions to always improve their practices and to innovate.
Now, Professor Rao, India launched the new education policy in 2020, which extensively focuses on attaining the highest global standards in the quality of higher education. Now, there have been several reforms which were introduced for school as well as higher vocational education, as well as research and technology. Ms. Story's also mentioned that so far. So how do you think that Australia can engage with India under the internationalization priorities which have been identified under the NEP?
So there are multiple things that Australia and India can collaborate upon. One of the things which we did at IIT Delhi was to join hands with the University of Queensland, and we started a joint PhD program. Under this program, it's a bilateral exchange of students. Students from Australia can come and study in India. So the students from India going to Australia and studying there. I think it has been a very successful program in just about 2.5 years since launch. Now we will be touching about 100 PhD students, the joint PhD students. A lot of industries are also participating. Another major thing that we also need to do as part of NEP is India's gross enrollment ratio, as per NEP, needs to go up to 50% from the existing 25% in about, by 2035 kind of a time frame. And for that, India, Australia can join hands and start joint campuses, because Australian universities will find it very difficult to do things on their own. Some university can come and start a campus, but I can tell you, it's not going to be easy for any Australian university to maneuver the Indian, bureaucratic system to start campuses and run them successfully. The best way forward is to join hands with the top institutions here and then start these extension campuses or joint campuses, and then offer programs as part of these joint programs.
So, Ms. Story, there has been a buzz around the autonomy of the universities which are functioning in India, especially with those with graded autonomy. So how does the Australian system of education look at it?
Thank you very much, Meghna. We're delighted with the way that educational institutions, just as workplaces more broadly, have adapted to the pandemic. It's been quite remarkable to see how Australian educational institutions have really leapt into the fray. And by their very quick action, we've seen that the institutions have provided continuity of study, both for the remarkable 80% of Indian students who have remained with us during the pandemic, for those who commenced their study during the pandemic, and even for those that went home. So these sorts of blended transnational models of education have become like a really remarkable fixture of the pandemic and our respective innovation. And while these things have really transformed the educational experience, there are other avenues that have remained the same, such as the extraordinary experience that Indian students receive when they go to Australia and they study with our institutions. Our research and our education and our teaching is ranked amongst the top in the world. And Indian students are able to use these qualifications to go throughout the world, as my colleagues and peers have mentioned, to really transform their careers into a successful one. Thanks, Meghna.
In fact, Professor Rao, you've been at the helm of India's premier institute, which has collaborated with Australian universities. What's going to be the way forward for this graded autonomy of universities that we are discussing?
Autonomy is in a way what even NEP talks about, a kind of a graded autonomy. It's time the IITs now, will get complete autonomy, which is something that is now expected to happen. And with the University of Queensland and IIT Delhi, we started a joint PhD program. We call it UKIDAR, and that's an independent body which is now funded by both the universities. And we are further now looking at starting off joint campuses, because IITs that way have that autonomy to start their own programs and campuses and all of that. I think that is where we are also now talking to University of Queensland, particularly in the agriculture sector, because that's one thing which IITs have completely missed out upon. There is not, except for one or two IITs, a little bit of an activity, but agriculture is one thing where in India, 50% of our population is in a way connected to agriculture, and IIT is not having a major role to play in terms of those technologies, is something that we are trying to address now with help of University of Queensland. So I think whatever autonomy is required to start these joint initiatives and programs, IITs already have. Probably, university system is a little bit different because they are all governed by the UGC. But IITs that way, have always enjoyed that autonomy, and we are already beginning to make use of this autonomy to join hands with Australian universities, like you mentioned, the Monash IIT Bombay program, IIT Delhi UQ program. Now are like 100 PhD students or more, and this has happened in a short enough time frame. So I think things are all looking good as far as this collaboration is concerned.
So this is very interesting. However, we do need to slip into a short break, and what Professor Wesley now tells us that the relationship between India and Australia may have gone back to at least 1930s. So on the other side, we're going to return and we will be discussing the relevance of the Australian core specializations as well. But after a short break, stay tuned. Well, welcome back. You're watching Australian Education, Indian Potential Partnership for Global Success. Well, in this part, let's tell you about the relevance of the Australian core specializations in STEM, health and management disciplines in shaping careers. So, Professor Wesley, I'm going to come straight across to you. What is it about this moment that makes the India-Australia relationship so very promising for research and education collaboration between our two nations?
A couple of things, really. The first one is the fact that India and Australia are part of the knowledge economy and the knowledge society. The fact is that all societies, or most societies at least, are moving to a situation where knowledge is becoming more and more integral to economic development and economic success. And of course, this means that higher education becomes absolutely crucial to the ability of any country to participate and lead in the knowledge economy. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that India is rising quickly, it's developing economically, and it's developing very quickly in the knowledge economy as well. Demographic trends tell us that, as Professor Rao was saying, there is a growing demand for higher education in India. India has, in fact, the largest population of university-age people between 18 and 23 of any country in the world.
Yes.
And that population is going to continue to grow for most of this decade, which means that the demand in India for quality higher education is going to continue to expand. So this is a real opportunity for collaboration between the two countries.
In fact, to a large extent, that collaboration process already started. It is only going to increase from here onwards. In fact, Professor Rao, this is the perfect time to bring you in. After all, under your leadership, we had seen the significant relationship, as we were discussing, between IIT Delhi and an Australian university. So what capabilities and shared values resulted in developing this relationship?
In fact, one thing which has happened because of this joint PhD program is, of course, one thing is it has ramped up pretty fast, almost like 100 students in a short time. And secondly, it has attracted to the system the students who otherwise would have gone to US. Many of these students who have joined the PhD program with the University of Queensland wouldn't have come to IIT Delhi had it not been this collaboration with Australia. So I think that is one major factor which we see as a positive thing at our end. And one thing we have also done is all these 100 PhD students are working on problems of societal relevance. So we have been very conscious that whatever we do, it should address a problem either in Australia or in India. And that is also the reason why industries from both Australia and India are also now supporting these students. Our goal is at least 50% of these students, should have industry support. And because two universities are involved here, the industries from Australia as well as industries from India are coming forward to support the students, which is one good thing. And because students are working on society relevant problems, the startups now, in fact, we are also now very keenly looking at the connecting startups at both the places, because India is a startup country now. We are the world's third largest kind of a startup ecosystem right now. And that is also the place where the deep tech entrepreneurship, you see a lot of unicorns coming out of India, but most of them are in the e-commerce and other business model innovation kind of areas, but none in the technology areas. I think through this joint PhD program, we are trying to see, can we now promote deep tech entrepreneurship, through these PhD students with the two countries involved, with the two universities involved. That's also one thing which we are very keenly looking at as part of the UKIDAR program as we move forward.
So in Australia, how is it that your nation can support these Indian students and professionals?
Yeah, thanks very much, Meghna. Look, I think at the outset, I would say Australia has one of the most supportive international education systems in the world. Our whole ecosystem is focused on ensuring the student has the best experience they possibly can whilst they are studying in Australia. Last year, our Minister for Education launched a new international education strategy, and core to that was the positioning of the student always being at the centre. This means that everything that we do in Australia is for the benefit of the student and ensuring their experience is positive.
Well, in fact, to ask you a very pointed question, Mr. Johnson, after all, you're the Minister Counsellor of the Department of Education, Skills and Employment. When it comes to migration and visa assistance, what can be offered? Because that has been a point of concern for most of the students in India and also the working professionals seeking a haven in other countries such as Australia. So in Australia, how is it that your nation can support these Indian students and professionals?
Yeah, thanks very much, Meghna. Look, I think at the outset, I would say Australia has one of the most supportive international education systems in the world. Our whole ecosystem is focused on ensuring the student has the best experience they possibly can whilst they are studying in Australia. Last year, our Minister for Education, launched a new international education strategy, and core to that was the positioning of the student always being at the centre. This means that everything that we do in Australia is for the benefit of the student and ensuring their experience is positive. This includes visas, as you say, Meghna, but also policies and programs that we put in place to ensure students get what they pay for, succeed and feel supported. Australia is unique in the world in having a robust student protection framework to protect their rights. We have legislation called the Education Support of Students Act, which sets up codes of conduct for education agents, a registration system for institutions which are offering courses to international students, and processes for resolving any issues should they unfortunately arise. So, for example, we have an international student ombudsman which can hear and resolve any complaints that may arise. For over 20 years, we have a very unique body that's still, as I understand it, unique in the world, called the Tuition Protection Service, which ensures a student is not out of pocket through no fault of their own should an institution close or cease to run a particular program. Besides, all our institutions, as you will have heard from Professor Wesley, provide early assistance and guidance in applying to study, finding accommodation, and also navigating the visa application process. Our visa settings are also focused on protecting students' rights. Australian student visa allows them to work while studying. Currently, that's up to 40 hours a week, but it is usually around 20 hours a week, which allows students to get valuable work experience, whilst also assisting manage their costs, living costs and tuition fees. So offer some of the most generous post-study work rights in the world. So for students, it's usually 2 years after the completion of their degree, and 3 years in the case of Masters by coursework and Masters by research students. In addition, Meghna, the Australian government has recently announced some new measures around visas that I think students and parents will find very attractive. And I don't really want to go into all the details of them here because there are many. So I encourage all of your viewers to visit the Study Australia website to find out more about these new measures. Thanks very much.
Well, this has been very informative. Study Australia website, you can go there, log in, and you can then access any other additional information you want. But before we let this panel go, and it's going so well and very informative, if I can add, Professor Wesley, now we've heard you speak about India being a great power of a new sort. So how do you see the diversity of India contributing to innovation in STEM, in health and associated technologically, in collaboration with Australia? Do you see this as the driving changes in the ways that Indian students are going to be engaging with the Australian study?
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing in terms of patterns of Indian students reaching out to study at Australian institutions is that different regions of India tend to produce different sorts of students. We've noticed, for instance, that many of our wonderful students in science, technology, engineering and medicine tend to come from some of the more southern states, whereas some of the social sciences, economics, that sort of thing, often come from the northern states, although there are exceptions to those as well. One of the things that I would point out, Meghna, is that one of the wonderful developments that we've seen is the innovation ecosystem that is beginning to develop between India and Australia, much of it focused around Indian students and Indian diaspora here in Australia and in India as well, developing those connections, sharing knowledge, innovating together.
So essentially, this is going to be a relationship which is going to be mutually beneficial to both the nations as we come forward. Thank you so much, Sarah Story, Professor Rao, Professor Wesley and Matthew Johnson for joining us. Of course, this is charting the next 20 years. It was a pleasure to have this very insightful discussion with you. Here on Times Now, we give our viewers information which is accurate and it is comprehensive, which will help you make an informed decision. And I hope that Australian Education, Indian Potential, the Partnership for Global Success, did just that for you. Thank you so much for watching.